You need to hear this before you buy another jar of honey. What you're about to discover might shock you, and it could save you from wasting money on fake honey that's essentially just sugar syrup in a cute bear bottle. I'm going to expose the honey industry's dirty little secret, and show you exactly which brands are lying to you. Here's the truth that big honey companies don't want you to know. Most of the honey sitting on grocery store shelves isn't really honey at all. It's been ultra-filtered, mixed with corn syrup, or diluted so much that it barely resembles what bees actually make. You deserve to know which brands are ripping you off, and which ones are actually giving you the real deal. And here's the kicker that'll really make your blood boil. You're paying premium prices for this fake stuff while the companies are laughing all the way to the bank. The honey fraud industry is worth billions of dollars, and unless you know what to look for, you're probably one of their victims. But not anymore, because I'm about to arm you with the knowledge you need to fight back. 16. Let's start with the brands you need to avoid immediately. First up is Subi Honey. Despite the charming name and nostalgic packaging that reminds you of simpler times, independent lab tests have repeatedly found this brand to be which strips out the pollen that makes honey actually honey. Without pollen, there's no way to trace where it came from, and it often gets mixed with cheaper syrups from questionable sources. You're essentially paying premium prices for glorified sugar water that has about as much nutritional value as the stuff you pour on pancakes. From a plastic bottle, the ultrafiltration process that Subi uses isn't just about making the honey look clearer and more appealing on the shelf. It's about hiding the origins of the honey. When you remove all the pollen, you remove the geographic fingerprint that would tell you where that honey came from. Why would a company want to hide that information? Usually because they're mixing in cheap imported honey from countries with poor quality control standards. Or worse, they're adding in corn syrup or rice syrup to stretch their supply and maximize profits. You're the one losing out. 2. Next on the avoid list is anything labeled great value honey from Walmart. Testing conducted by food safety laboratories has shown that many batches contain no pollen whatsoever. That's not just a red flag, that's a giant banner screaming that something is seriously wrong. Real honey always contains at least some pollen because that's literally how bees make it. They collect nectar and pollen together, and when they process it into honey, some of that pollen remains. It's an unavoidable part of the natural honey-making process. When you see zero pollen in a honey sample, you're looking at a product that's been so heavily processed and potentially mixed with other substances that calling it honey is basically fraud. The absence of pollen means the product has been pushed through extremely fine filters under high pressure and temperature, which also destroys the beneficial enzymes and antioxidants that make honey worth consuming in the first place. At that point, what you have is just fructose and glucose, which you could get cheaper from a bag of sugar. What makes this even more insulting is that Walmart positions great value as a budget-friendly option for families trying to save money. But you're not saving money if you're buying a fake product. You're just spending less on something worthless. Real honey has antimicrobial properties, contains antioxidants, has trace vitamins and minerals, and can help with everything from wound healing to soothing coughs. Fake filtered honey has none of these benefits. You're literally just eating expensive sugar. 3. Wholesome sweeteners. Organic honey sounds healthy, right? The word organic is right there in the name, and we've been conditioned to believe that organic means pure, natural, and trustworthy. Wrong. Multiple investigations by journalists and food safety advocates have found this brand selling honey that likely originated from countries known for honey fraud, particularly China, even though the label might say organic and might have all the right certification stamps. The reality is that much of this honey has been transshipped through other countries to hide its true origins. Here's how the scheme works. China produces massive amounts of cheap honey, but it also has a well-documented problem with honey adulteration. Chinese honey has been banned or heavily restricted in many countries because of concerns about antibiotics, heavy metals, and the addition of cheap sweeteners. So what do dishonest exporters do? They ship the honey to a third country like India, Thailand, or Malaysia, repackage it there, and then export it with documentation showing it came from that intermediary country instead of China. By the time it reaches your grocery store shelf with an organic label, it's been laundered through multiple countries and you have no idea what you're actually getting. You're paying premium organic prices, sometimes double or triple what regular honey costs, for potentially fake honey that has been on a world tour specifically to deceive you. The organic certification only verifies the practices of the final seller or packager, not the actual origin of the honey or what happened to it before it reached them. This is one of the biggest loopholes in organic labeling, and companies like Wholesome Sweeteners exploit it ruthlessly. 4. Clover-made honey is another one to skip entirely. This brand has been caught up in lawsuits over mislabeling and selling ultra-filtered honey that doesn't meet the FDA's technical definition of honey. Yes, the FDA actually has a definition for honey, and it includes the requirement that honey contain pollen. When you filter out all the pollen, you technically no longer have honey according to the FDA's own standards. Yet somehow these products still sit on shelves labeled as honey, and most consumers have no idea they're being deceived. The filtration process Clover-Made uses removes virtually everything that makes honey beneficial for your health, all those antioxidants that fight inflammation and protect your cells from damage. Gone the enzymes that aid digestion and have antimicrobial properties, destroyed by heat and filtration. The trace minerals like calcium, iron, and zinc, filtered out. What you're left with is empty calories that spike your blood sugar just like regular white sugar, completely defeating the purpose of buying honey in the first place. Think about why you buy honey instead of sugar. Most people choose honey because they believe it's healthier, more natural, and offers benefits beyond just sweetness. When companies strip away everything except the sugar content, they're taking your money under false pretenses. You think you're making a healthy choice, but you're actually consuming a product that's been so degraded it offers nothing your body needs. 5 Finally, avoid most generic store brands unless they specifically state they're raw and unfiltered. Brands like Kroger Honey, Safeway Honey, Albertsons Honey, and other supermarket private labels are often blended from multiple sources, heavily filtered, and sometimes contain added sweeteners that aren't even disclosed on the label. These products are designed to hit a price point, not a quality standard, and your body pays the price for that. Cost-cutting. Store brand honey is typically sourced from the cheapest suppliers available, which often means importers who specialize in blending honey from multiple countries. They'll mix a little bit of domestic honey with large amounts of cheap imported honey, filter it until it's crystal clear, and heat it to prevent crystallization. The result is a product that looks like honey, pours like honey, and technically might pass as honey in the loosest sense, but delivers none of the health benefits you're buying it for. The economics of store brand honey should tell you everything you need to know. When you see honey being sold for $2 or $3 per pound, ask yourself how that's possible. Beekeepers have costs. They need to maintain hives, protect bees from diseases and parasites, harvest the honey, extract it, and bottle it. Real beekeeping is labor-intensive and expensive. There's no way to produce genuine honey and sell it profitably at rock-bottom prices. The only way to hit those price points is to cut corners, blend in cheaper substances, or source from countries with lower standards and higher fraud rates. Now let's talk about the good stuff, the brands that are actually giving you pure real honey that delivers the health benefits you're paying for. First is Nate's raw and unfiltered honey. This brand has consistently passed purity tests, conducted by independent laboratories and sources from trusted beekeepers who follow ethical practices. It's minimally processed, which means you're getting all the beneficial enzymes, antioxidants, and pollen that make honey worth eating in the first place. What sets Nate's apart is their transparency. They're willing to tell you where their honey comes from. They don't use ultrafiltration, and they keep the processing to an absolute minimum. The honey is strained just enough to remove bits of wax and bee parts, but all the good stuff remains intact. When you open a bottle of Nate's, you're getting something that's pretty close to what you'd get if you harvested honey directly from a hive yourself. Yes, it costs more than the fake stuff, usually around $10 to $15 per pound depending on where you buy it, but you're actually getting what you pay for. You're getting a food product that contains beneficial compounds like hydrogen peroxide, which gives honey its antimicrobial properties. You're getting antioxidants like flavonoids and phenolic acids that reduce inflammation and may lower your risk of heart disease. You're getting real pollen that can help with seasonal allergies. These aren't marketing claims. These are actual measurable benefits that have been verified by scientific research. Wetherspoon Raw Manuka honey is another winner, especially if you're looking for honey with serious medicinal properties. Manuka honey from New Zealand has been extensively studied and verified for its antibacterial benefits, particularly its content of methylglutamic, a compound that gives Manuka honey its unique healing properties. Wetherspoon is transparent about their sourcing, provides batch tracking so you can verify your specific jar, and their products consistently test as genuine Manuka honey with verified MGO levels. Manuka honey isn't cheap. A small jar can cost $30 to $50 or more, depending on the MGO rating. But if you're using honey for medicinal purposes, for wound care, or to fight infections, genuine Manuka honey is worth every penny. Studies have shown it can kill antibiotic-resistant bacteria, speed wound healing, and even help with digestive issues. This isn't folk medicine or wishful thinking. This is documented scientific fact with dozens of peer-reviewed studies backing it up. The key with Manuka honey is making sure you're getting the real thing, because this is one of the most counterfeited honey types in the world. Wetherspoon provides a Chi factor or MGO rating on every jar, which tells you the level of beneficial compounds present. They also participate in third-party verification programs. When you buy Wetherspoon, you can be confident you're getting genuine New Zealand Manuka honey, not a cheap imitation from somewhere else. The third brand you can trust is really Raw Honey. This company doesn't heat or filter their honey at all, so you're getting it almost exactly as it comes from the hive. It's crystallized, it's cloudy, it might have bits of honeycomb in it, and that's exactly how you know it's legitimate. This is what honey looked like for thousands of years before food manufacturers decided it needed to be clear and smooth to appeal to modern consumers who've been conditioned to think cloudy means bad. Really, Raw Honey embraces the natural state of honey. Their product crystallizes quickly because it hasn't been heated, and those crystals are proof that you're dealing with the real deal. If that texture bothers you, you can gently warm the jar in a bowl of warm water to liquefy it again. But that crystallization is actually proof of purity. Fake honey or heavily processed honey stays liquid at months or years because it's been heated to high temperatures that destroy the natural sugars that cause crystallization. What you'll notice immediately when you try really raw honey is the flavor. Real, unprocessed honey tastes completely different from the stuff you're used to. It's more complex, with floral notes and subtle variations depending on what plants the bees were visiting. It's not just generic sweet, it's interesting sweet. That flavor complexity comes from all the trace compounds that processed honey has had removed. Here's what you need to remember when you're shopping for honey. Real honey crystallizes over time. If your honey has been sitting in the pantry for 6 months or a year and it's still perfectly smooth and liquid, that's deeply suspicious. Real honey should be thick, and it should eventually solidify into a grainy or crystalline texture. You can gently heat it to liquefy it again, but that crystallization is actually proof of purity, not a defect. The crystallization happens because real honey is a supersaturated sugar solution. It contains more sugar than would normally dissolve in that amount of water, which makes it inherently unstable. Over time, glucose molecules start to separate out and form crystals. This is a natural process that happens to all real honey eventually. The speed of crystallization depends on the types of flowers the bees visited, the storage temperature, and the glucose to fructose ratio, but it always happens eventually with genuine honey. Check the label carefully for words like raw, unfiltered, and sin. These terms indicate minimal processing and better traceability. Raw means the honey hasn't been heated above hive temperature, which preserves all the enzymes and beneficial compounds. Unfiltered means it still contains pollen and other trace elements. Single source means it came from one location or one type of flower, which makes it easier to verify authenticity. If the label just says honey with no other qualifying information, you're probably looking at a blended, filtered product that could contain anything. Look at the price too. I know nobody wants to hear this because we're all trying to stretch our grocery budgets, but real honey costs more. If you're seeing honey for $3 or $4 a pound, it's almost certainly been diluted, adulterated, or sourced from questionable suppliers. Quality honey from responsible beekeepers costs more to produce, and that's reflected in the retail price. You should expect to pay at least $8 to $12 per pound for genuine raw honey from domestic sources, and more for specialty varieties like Manuka or Tupelo. 14: Think about what goes into producing real honey. Beekeepers need to invest in hives, equipment, and protective gear. They need to monitor their bees constantly for diseases and parasites. They need to provide supplemental feeding when necessary. They need to harvest carefully to avoid harming the colony. They need to extract and bottle in sanitary conditions. All of this takes time, skill, and money. When you see honey being sold for less than the cost of production, something shady is happening behind the scenes. The honey industry has a massive fraud problem, with some estimates suggesting that up to 70 or even 80% of the honey sold in stores is adulterated in some way. You're not crazy for being suspicious, and you're not being paranoid for questioning what's in that bottle. This is a real, documented issue that affects millions of consumers who think they're making a healthy choice but are actually being systematically deceived. The fraud takes many forms. Sometimes it's ultrafiltration to hide the geographic origin. Sometimes it's the addition of corn syrup, rice syrup, or beet sugar to stretch the supply. Sometimes it's heating honey to extreme temperatures to prevent crystallization. which destroys the beneficial compounds. Sometimes it's mixing old, degraded honey with a small amount of fresh honey to improve the appearance, and sometimes it's complete fabrication, where the product contains little or no actual honey at all. Testing technology has improved dramatically in recent years, making it easier to detect some forms of fraud. Labs can now test for specific pollen types to verify geographic origin. They can test for foreign sugars using nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. They can measure enzyme activity to determine if honey has been overheated. But the fraudsters keep adapting, finding new ways to beat the tests. It's an ongoing arms race between honest producers and those trying to make a quick profit. Your best bet is to buy local honey directly from farmers, markets, or from beekeepers when possible. Not only are you supporting small businesses and local agriculture, but you're also getting a product you can actually trust. You can meet the person who harvested it, visit their operation, ask questions about their methods, and see firsthand how the honey is produced. There's no supply chain where your honey could get swapped out or adulterated. What the beekeeper sells you is what you get. Local honey also offers unique benefits, particularly for people with seasonal allergies. The theory, which has some scientific support, is that consuming small amounts of local pollen in honey can help desensitize your immune system to those allergens. It's similar to allergy shots but much tastier. This only works with local honey though, because you need exposure to the specific pollens in your area. Imported honey from across the country or around the world won't help with your local allergies. Building a relationship with a local beekeeper can also teach you a lot about honey quality. Once you've tasted truly fresh raw honey straight from local hives, you'll never be satisfied with the processed supermarket stuff again. You'll understand what honey is supposed to taste like, and you'll be able to spot fake or degraded honey immediately. It's like the difference between a tomato from your garden and one from the supermarket in January. Once you know what the real thing tastes like, there's no going back. If you can't access local honey, stick with the verified brands I mentioned earlier. Do your research before buying. Check if the company has been involved in any lawsuits or investigations. Look for third-party testing results. Read reviews from other consumers. The information is out there if you're willing to look for it. A few minutes of research can save you from wasting money on fake products. Stop wasting your money on fake honey that's making you less healthy instead of more. Switch to one of these rarefied, pure brands. Or better yet, find a local beekeeper you can trust. Your body will thank you. Your taste buds will thank you. And you'll finally be getting the real benefits that honey is supposed to provide. Real honey supports your immune system, provides antioxidants, offers natural energy, and tastes amazing. Fake honey does none of these things. Make the switch today and never look back.